Minjun Carter sat in his sergeant's office and wondered why he was being called in. He had been a detective for 7 years. He was good at his job. Most people respected his work. So when Sergeant Williams asked him to sit down with a serious look on his face, Minjun felt worried. "I have a special assignment for you," the sergeant said. He pushed a folder across the desk. "It's not the usual type of case." Minjun opened the folder. Inside were papers about a fast food restaurant called Burger Palace. It was on the east side of the city. The papers showed the address, the manager's name, and some notes about anonymous tips. Someone had been calling the police station for 3 months. They said strange things were happening at this restaurant. Late-night deliveries that did not look normal, money that did not add up correctly, workers who seemed afraid to talk. "You want me to investigate a burger place?" Minjun asked. He tried not to sound disappointed, but it was hard. He had just finished a major robbery case. He thought his next assignment would be something important. "I know it sounds small," Sergeant Williams said, "but remember the Chen case last year? That started with tips about a dry cleaning business. It turned into our biggest drug bust in 5 years. Minjun remembered. The sergeant had a point. Sometimes big crimes hid in small places. Still, watching a fast food restaurant felt like a step backward in his career. "What do you need me to do?" Minjun asked. "Go undercover. Get hired as a regular worker. Watch everything. Report what you see. We need someone inside for at least a month, maybe 2. "A month of flipping burgers?" Minjun said. "A month of being a detective," the sergeant corrected him, "just in a different setting." Minjun left the office with the folder. He went home and read everything carefully. The tips mentioned a manager named Robert Hayes. He had worked at Burger Palace for 4 years. Before that, he managed another location for the same company. The tips said he was involved in something illegal, but they did not say exactly what. The next day, Minjun created his cover story. He would pretend to be a college dropout who needed steady work. He practiced talking like someone who had given up on bigger dreams. He wore old jeans and a simple shirt. He made his application look messy on purpose, with a few spelling mistakes. 3 days later, he got a phone call. Burger Palace wanted him to come in for an interview. Minjun drove to the restaurant and parked in the back. The building looked normal. It was part of a big chain. Hundreds of Burger Palace restaurants existed across the country. This one looked exactly like all the others. Red and yellow paint, big windows, a drive-through lane on the side. Inside, the smell of cooking oil and grilled meat filled the air. A few customers sat at tables eating lunch. Behind the counter, workers moved quickly, taking orders and filling bags with food. Everything looked completely normal. A woman at the counter told Minjun to wait. After 5 minutes, a man came out from the back office. He was in his 40s with short brown hair and a manager's uniform. His name tag said Robert Hayes, manager. "You must be Minjun," Robert said. He shook Minjun's hand firmly. "Come to the office." They walked through the kitchen area. Minjun watched everything carefully. The kitchen looked clean. Workers called out orders to each other. Burgers sizzled on the grill. Everything seemed professional and organized. In the small office, Robert sat behind a desk covered with papers and schedules. He asked Minjun basic questions. Why did he want this job? Could he work evenings and weekends? Had he ever worked in food service before? Minjun gave his practiced answers. He needed money. His college plans did not work out. He could work any hours they needed. He had worked at a pizza place 2 years ago, but only for a few months. Robert nodded along. He did not seem suspicious. He explained the job. The pay was minimum wage. Employees got 1 free meal per shift. The schedule changed every week. Most workers were young people, high school or college students who needed part-time jobs. "Can you start Monday?" Robert asked. "Yes, definitely," Minjun said. "Good. Come in at 3 in the afternoon. I'll have someone train you on the register and basic food prep. Wear comfortable shoes. You'll be standing all day." Minjun thanked him and left. As he drove away, he called his sergeant. "I'm in. I start Monday." The first week was exactly what Minjun expected. Boring, repetitive work. He learned how to use the cash register. He memorized the menu, which had dozens of items: burgers, chicken sandwiches, salads, sides, drinks, and desserts. Every item had a number code. He had to enter the codes quickly while customers waited. He also learned food preparation, how to assemble burgers, how to scoop fries into containers, how to pour drinks without spilling. The work was simple, but tiring. His feet hurt after every shift. His clothes smelled like grease when he got home. But Min-jun stayed focused on his real job. He watched Robert carefully. The manager walked around the restaurant checking on everything. He made sure workers did their jobs correctly. He counted money in the office several times during each shift. He talked to suppliers who delivered food and supplies. Nothing seemed unusual. Min-jun also paid attention to the other workers. Most were in their late teens or early 20s. They talked about school, friends, and weekend plans. A few older workers also had shifts. One woman in her 50s worked mornings. A man in his 30s worked nights. One worker caught Min-jun's attention more than the others. Her name was Sarah Kim. She was a college student, probably 20 or 21 years old. She worked the drive-through window most evenings. She was good at her job. She took orders quickly, handed out food with a smile, and always remembered to ask if customers wanted sauce packets. But Min-jun noticed something else about Sarah. She seemed nervous, not nervous about the work, nervous about something else. When Robert walked past her, her hands would shake slightly. She would look down and focus extra hard on whatever she was doing. She never made eye contact with the manager unless he spoke to her directly. Other workers seemed a little nervous around Robert too, but Sarah's reaction was different. It was stronger, more afraid. Min-jun had been a detective long enough to recognize fear when he saw it. On Friday of his first week, Min-jun finished his shift at 10 at night. He was tired and ready to go home. As he walked to his car in the parking lot, he thought about what he had seen. Nothing pointed to criminal activity. No strange deliveries, no suspicious behavior. Just a normal fast food restaurant with a manager who ran things carefully and workers who did their jobs. But Sarah's fear stayed in his mind. Something was wrong. He just did not know what it was yet. Min-jun got in his car and sat there for a moment. He had been undercover before, but usually in more serious situations. Drug deals, theft rings, organized crime. This felt different, smaller. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the crime here was hidden so well that it looked completely normal. He started his car and drove home. Monday, he would start his second week. He would watch more carefully. He would pay attention to the small details. Because in detective work, small details often told the biggest stories. And something was definitely happening at Burger Palace. Min-jun was sure of it now. He just had to figure out what it was. 3 weeks passed. Min-jun settled into the routine at Burger Palace. He learned everyone's names. He made small talk about weather and sports. He complained about difficult customers like everyone else did. Nobody suspected he was a detective. To them, he was just another worker trying to make money. But Min-jun kept watching. He noticed small things. Robert kept the office locked when he was not inside. Robert made all the phone calls himself, never letting other workers answer the office phone. Robert personally received all deliveries even when he was busy with other tasks. These things were unusual but not illegal. Managers often protected company information. They often handled money and supplies themselves. Nothing Min-jun saw broke any laws. Then, on a Tuesday evening during his 4th week, something different happened. Min-jun was working the front counter when a man walked in. He was about 40 years old, maybe older. He wore an expensive suit with a blue tie. His shoes were shiny and looked new. Everything about him said he had money and a good job. The man got in line and waited his turn. When he reached the counter, Min-jun smiled and asked for his order. "I would like a cheeseburger," the man said slowly. "But no pickles. Add extra onions. Tomatoes on the side, not on the burger. Light ketchup only on the bottom bun. And the lettuce must be fresh, not wilted." Min-jun entered the complicated order into the computer. "Anything else?" "Yes, a large fries. But I need them fresh from the fryer. Not fries that have been sitting under the heat lamp. And a medium drink, but fill the cup only 3/4 full with ice." Min-jun nodded and finished entering everything. The total came up on the screen. The man paid with a credit card. Min-jun gave him a receipt with a number on it. "We'll call your number when it's ready." The man took his receipt and stood to the side. Min-jun watched him while helping other customers. The man's eyes moved around the restaurant. He looked at the workers. He looked at the kitchen. He looked at the office door. He seemed to be searching for something. When the food came up, Min-jun called the man's number. The man came to the counter and opened his bag. He looked inside carefully, checking everything. "These fries are not fresh," the man said calmly. "I can tell they've been sitting for at least 5 minutes. I'm sorry, sir. I'll get you fresh ones right away. And this burger has pickles on it. I specifically said no pickles." Min-jun looked. The man was right. Someone in the kitchen had made a mistake. "I apologize. Let me get you a new burger." "I'll wait," the man said. He did not sound angry. His voice stayed calm and polite, but something about the way he spoke made Min-jun uncomfortable. Min-jun brought the order back to the kitchen. He told them to make everything fresh. Sarah was working the sandwich station that evening. When she saw the returned order, her face went pale. "Was it the man in the suit?" she asked quietly. "Yes. Do you know him?" Sarah did not answer. She quickly made a new burger, being very careful to follow all the special instructions. She made sure no pickles touched anything. She put the tomatoes in a separate container. She checked everything twice. Min-jun took the new food out. The man examined it again. This time he seemed satisfied. He took his bag and left without another word. "Who was that?" Min-jun asked Sarah when things got quiet. "Just a customer," Sarah said. But her hands were shaking again. That fear was back in her eyes. 2 days later, on Thursday evening, the same man returned. He came to the counter and ordered another complicated meal. Different items this time, but just as many special requests. No salt on the fries, extra sauce on the side. Onion rings cooked for exactly 3 minutes, no more, no less. Again, he found something wrong with his order. Again, Sarah made the replacement. Again, the man left without causing a scene. Min-jun realized this was a pattern. This man came twice a week, always on Tuesday and Thursday evenings around the same time. Always with difficult orders, always finding mistakes. Over the next 2 weeks, Min-jun watched it happen 4 more times. The other workers started calling the man Mr. Peterson because that was the name on his credit card receipts. Everyone groaned when he walked in because they knew he would complain. But they also said he was not really rude. He never yelled or made a scene. He just pointed out problems very calmly and waited for corrections. Robert Hayes hated Mr. Peterson. Min-jun could see it. Every time Peterson complained, Robert got tense. He would come out of his office and stand near the counter, watching. He would ask workers what went wrong. He would lecture them about getting orders right the first time. One Thursday evening, Min-jun was taking his break in the back room. Sarah came in to grab her water bottle. Another worker, a young man named Ji-won Park, was also on break. "Mr. Peterson was here again," Ji-won said. "He sent back his chicken sandwich twice." Sarah sat down heavily in a chair. She looked tired. "He's doing this on purpose." "What do you mean?" Ji-won asked. "He's trying to cause trouble. He knows Robert hates complaints. If I keep messing up orders, Robert will fire me." "But you're not messing up. The kitchen is messing up. Robert doesn't care who made the mistake, he just knows it's happening when I'm working." "Why would someone do that?" Ji-won asked. "Just to get you fired? That's crazy." Sarah shook her head. She looked like she wanted to say more but decided not to. She finished her water and went back to work. Min-jun sat there thinking. This was not part of his investigation. This was something else. A personal problem between Sarah and this Peterson man. But his detective instincts were alert. Something was wrong here. Something beyond just a difficult customer. That night after his shift, Min-jun sat in his car in the parking lot. He pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app. He wrote down everything he knew about Mr. Peterson. Middle-aged man, expensive clothes, came every Tuesday and Thursday, made complicated orders, always found mistakes. Sarah seemed afraid of him. Robert got angry every time he appeared. Min-jun decided to run a check on Peterson. It was not part of his official investigation, but he was curious. The next morning, he went to the police station during his day off. He used the computer system to search for David Peterson, matching the name from the credit card receipts. The information came up quickly. David Peterson, age 44. No criminal record. No outstanding warrants. But there was something interesting. Peterson used to work for Burger Palace, not as a regular worker, as a regional manager for the parent company. He managed multiple restaurant locations in the city, but Peterson had been fired 2 years ago. The record did not say why, just that his employment ended. Min-jun dug a little deeper and found some old news articles. There had been an investigation at the company. Something about missing money. Peterson's name appeared in some articles, but no charges were ever filed. Min-jun sat back in his chair. This changed everything. Peterson was not just a random difficult customer. He had history with Burger Palace. He had been fired under suspicious circumstances. And now he was coming back to cause problems at one specific location. The location where Robert Hayes was the manager. Was this revenge? Was Peterson trying to get back at the company that fired him? Or was it something more specific? Something connected to Robert? And why was Sarah caught in the middle? What was her connection to Peterson? Min-jun had more questions now than answers. His original investigation was supposed to be about possible criminal activity at the restaurant. Late-night deliveries, missing money, scared workers. But now he had stumbled onto something else. A revenge story playing out at the counter. A former regional manager tormenting a current manager through complicated food orders. The two investigations might be connected, or they might be completely separate. Min-jun did not know yet, but he knew one thing for sure. He needed to keep watching. Both mysteries were happening in the same place. The criminal activity he was sent to find, and this strange revenge situation. Both involved Robert Hayes. Both involved frightened workers. Both involved secrets. Min-jun closed his laptop and left the station. He had another shift at Burger Palace that evening. He would watch more carefully now. He would pay attention to every detail. Because in detective work, nothing was ever simple. And everything was connected somehow. The answer was there, hidden in plain sight, behind a fast food counter. He just had to find it. Min-jun decided to volunteer for closing shifts. The restaurant closed at 11 at night. Most workers preferred earlier shifts, so Robert was happy when Min-jun said he could work late. This gave Min-jun a chance to observe what happened after most customers left. The first closing shift was on a Monday. Min-jun worked with Sarah and 2 other employees. They spent the last hour cleaning everything, wiping down counters, mopping floors, putting away food, counting the cash in the registers. Robert stayed in his office doing paperwork. Around 10:30, after most of the cleaning was done, Robert told everyone to take a break. He said he needed to finish some manager tasks alone. The other workers went to the break room. Min-jun followed them, but he stayed alert. The second closing shift was more interesting. It was a Wednesday night. Only Min-jun, Sarah, and one other worker named Hye-jin were scheduled. Business was slow. By 10 o'clock, the restaurant was empty except for them. Robert got a phone call around 10:15. Min-jun was cleaning the front counter, but he could hear Robert's voice from the office. The door was partly open. Robert spoke quietly, but Min-jun caught a few words. Yes, same time. Back door. 15 minutes. Min-jun felt his detective instincts wake up. A late-night meeting at a fast food restaurant? Using the back door? That was suspicious. Robert came out of the office. You 3 keep cleaning the front. I need to handle some business in the stockroom. Don't come to the back unless I call you. The 3 workers nodded. Robert disappeared toward the back of the restaurant where the stockroom and rear exit were located. Min-jun kept cleaning, but his mind was racing. He needed to see what was happening in the back. But he could not just walk back there. Robert had told them to stay in front. If Min-jun disobeyed, it would look suspicious. He thought quickly. The restaurant had security cameras in several places. The office had a monitor that showed all the camera feeds. If Min-jun could get into the office, he might be able to see what was happening in back. I need to use the bathroom. Min-jun announced to the other two workers. Okay, Hyejin said, not looking up from mopping. Min-jun walked toward the bathrooms, which were near the office. The office door was slightly open. The monitor inside showed 4 camera views. One showed the front counter, one showed the dining area, one showed the kitchen, and one showed the back hallway near the stockroom. Min-jun glanced at the back hallway camera. He saw Robert standing by the rear door. Then the door opened. 2 men came inside. They were both young, maybe late 20s. They wore regular clothes, jeans, and jackets. They did not look like food suppliers. They did not have uniforms or delivery trucks visible outside. Each man carried a backpack. Not big hiking backpacks, just regular ones like students used. The men talked to Robert for a moment. Min-jun could not hear what they said. Then one of the men handed Robert something. It looked like an envelope. Robert opened it and looked inside. He nodded and seemed satisfied. Robert then handed the 2 men 2 bags. They looked like regular paper bags from the restaurant, the kind used for takeout orders. But these bags were taped shut. The men put the bags in their backpacks. They talked for another minute, then left through the back door. The whole exchange took maybe 3 minutes. Robert looked around carefully, then walked back toward the office. Min-jun quickly moved away from the office door. He went into the bathroom and washed his hands. When he came out, Robert was back in the office, counting money. Min-jun returned to the front and continued cleaning. His heart was beating fast. He had just witnessed something clearly suspicious. A secret late-night meeting, 2 men with backpacks, an exchange of money and packages. This was exactly the kind of activity the anonymous tips had mentioned, but Min-jun needed more information. What was in those bags? Were they drugs? Stolen goods? Money? He needed to see more before he could make any arrests. One meeting was not enough evidence. He needed to establish a pattern. He needed to know who those men were. He needed proof of what was being exchanged. The shift ended at 11:30. Everyone clocked out and left. Min-jun drove home, but his mind was working on the case. He had found what he was looking for: criminal activity, secret meetings, late-night exchanges. But he could not act yet. If he moved too soon, he might not catch everyone involved. He might not have enough evidence to make charges stick. He decided to install a hidden camera in the stockroom. It was risky but necessary. He needed clear video of these meetings. The security cameras in the restaurant only covered certain areas, and Robert probably knew exactly where all the blind spots were. 3 days later, Min-jun worked another closing shift. This time he was scheduled alone with Robert to do a deep cleaning of the kitchen. Min-jun had volunteered for this shift specifically. It gave him a chance to be near the stockroom without other workers around. While Robert was in the office doing end-of-night paperwork, Min-jun went to the stockroom. He had brought a small camera with him, hidden in his jacket pocket. The camera was tiny, about the size of a quarter. It was the kind police used for surveillance. Battery-powered, motion-activated with night vision. Min-jun found a good spot on a high shelf, behind some boxes of paper cups. The camera had a view of the back door and most of the stockroom. He positioned it carefully and turned it on. The tiny red light blinked once, then went dark. It was recording. Min-jun finished his work and left. Over the next week, he kept his normal schedule. He worked his shifts. He did his job. He acted like a regular employee. But he was counting down the days until he could retrieve the camera and see what it had recorded. On his next closing shift, exactly 1 week later, Min-jun was able to get back to the stockroom alone. He retrieved the camera and put it in his pocket. Later that night, at home, he watched the footage on his laptop. The camera had captured 2 meetings. Both followed the same pattern. Late at night, after the restaurant closed, Robert meeting with 2 men at the back door. Money being exchanged for bags. The men leaving quickly. But this time, Min-jun's camera had captured something the restaurant's security cameras could not. Clear views of the men's faces. Clear shots of the exchange. And most importantly, a moment where one of the bags tore slightly and Min-jun could see what was inside. Pills. Small bottles and plastic bags full of pills. Min-jun sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. This was a drug operation. Robert was using the restaurant as a distribution point. The late-night deliveries were actually pickups by drug dealers. Robert was providing them with pills, probably prescription medications being sold illegally on the street. This was serious. Much more serious than the embezzlement or financial crimes the anonymous tips had mentioned. Drug distribution carried heavy penalties. Robert could go to prison for years, but Min-jun still had questions. Where was Robert getting the drugs? Who was he working with? Were the two men dealers or just delivery people for a bigger operation? How long had this been going on? He needed more evidence before moving. He needed to identify the two men. He needed to find out where the drugs came from. And he needed to do all of this without blowing his cover. The next day, Min-jun met with his sergeant at the police station. He showed him the video footage. The sergeant watched carefully, his face getting more serious as the video played. "Good work," the sergeant said when it finished. "This is exactly what we needed. But you're right, we need more. Can you identify those two men?" "Not yet. But I can try to get photos and run them through the database." "Do it, and keep watching. Find out how often this happens. We need to know the full scope of this operation before we shut it down." Min-jun agreed. He would continue his undercover work. He would gather more evidence. He would identify everyone involved. But there was still the other situation. The Peterson revenge problem. Sarah's fear. The complicated orders and constant complaints. That mystery was separate from the drug operation, but it was still happening in the same place. And Sarah was caught in the middle of both situations. Min-jun realized his job was getting complicated. He was not just investigating one crime anymore. He was watching multiple situations unfold at the same time. The drug operation, Peterson's revenge campaign, Sarah's fear, and somehow Robert Hayes was at the center of all of it. The next Tuesday, Mr. Peterson came in for his usual difficult order. Min-jun watched him carefully now with new understanding. Peterson was not just a random angry customer. He was a former manager who had been fired. He was conducting his own investigation or revenge campaign against Robert. But why? What had Robert done to Peterson? And how did Sarah fit into this story? Min-jun needed answers. But getting those answers meant asking questions. And asking questions might blow his cover. He had to be very careful about what he did next. One thing was certain, though. Everything was connected somehow. The drugs, the revenge, the fear, the secrets. It was all part of one big story, and Min-jun was determined to figure out what that story was. The following Tuesday started like any other day at Burger Palace. Min-jun worked the afternoon shift. Business was steady but not too busy. Sarah worked the drive-through window. Everything seemed normal. Then at 7:30, Mr. Peterson walked in. But this time he was not alone. A woman in a business suit walked beside him. She carried a briefcase. She looked professional and serious. Min-jun recognized the type immediately. She was a lawyer. Peterson got in line and waited his turn. When he reached the counter, he ordered his usual complicated meal. Burger with specific modifications. Fries prepared exactly right. Drink with precise amounts of ice. Min-jun took the order carefully, entering every detail. The lawyer stood beside Peterson, watching everything. She did not say anything, but her presence made Min-jun nervous. Other workers noticed her, too. Everyone could tell something was different today. The food came up from the kitchen. Min-jun called Peterson's number. Peterson came to the counter and opened his bag. He examined everything carefully, just like always. The lawyer watched over his shoulder. "This burger has pickles," Peterson said calmly. "I ordered no pickles." "I'm sorry, sir. Let me fix that right away." "This is the 6th time I have ordered this exact burger," Peterson continued, his voice still calm but clear. "And this is the 6th time it has been made incorrectly. I have documentation of every visit, every order, every mistake." The lawyer opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Inside were receipts, photographs, and written notes. Dates and times of every visit. Pictures of incorrect orders. Detailed descriptions of problems. Robert heard the conversation from his office. He came out immediately, his face tight with anger, but he kept his voice professional. "Sir, I apologize for any issues. We'll remake your order right away, and I'll personally make sure it's correct." "I don't want another remake," Peterson said. I want you to know that I am filing a formal complaint with your corporate headquarters. I am also filing complaints with the health department and the labor board. This restaurant has consistently failed to provide proper service. I believe it is part of a pattern of discrimination and harassment. The lawyer handed Robert a business card. My client has documented numerous violations. You'll be hearing from corporate within the week. And if this continues, we'll explore legal options. Other customers in the restaurant stopped eating and watched. Workers behind the counter stood frozen. Nobody knew what to say. Robert took the business card. His hand shook slightly with anger, but he maintained his professional voice. I understand. We take all complaints seriously. If you'll give me your contact information, I'll make sure corporate reaches out to you directly. Peterson and his lawyer left without taking any food. They had made their point. This was not about getting a correct burger anymore. This was about building a case. This was about public confrontation. This was about revenge. After they left, Robert stood at the counter for a moment, breathing hard. Then he turned to Sarah. His face was red. His voice came out harsh and loud. This is your fault, he said. Every time this man comes in, you mess up his order. Every single time. I don't make the food, Sarah said quietly. I just take the orders and hand them out. You're responsible for customer satisfaction at your station, and you're failing. This is unacceptable. One more complaint from that customer, and you're fired. Do you understand? Sarah nodded, her eyes filling with tears. She did not argue. She just turned back to her window and continued working. Minjun watched Robert storm back into his office and slam the door. The other workers exchanged glances but said nothing. Nobody wanted to be the next target of Robert's anger. The rest of the shift was tense. Everyone worked quietly, avoiding the office. Sarah looked like she might cry at any moment, but she held it together. At 9 o'clock, her shift ended and she left quickly. Minjun's shift ended at 10. He was cleaning up when Jiwon pulled him aside. We need to talk to Sarah, Jiwon said quietly. She's going to quit. And I don't think she should. None of this is her fault. What do you mean? Minjun asked, pretending he did not know anything. Come to the break room. Sarah came back. She's waiting there. Minjun followed Jiwon to the small break room in the back. Sarah sat at the table, her head in her hands. She looked up when they came in. I can't do this anymore, Sarah said. I need this job, but I can't handle the stress. Robert is going to fire me anyway. Why would that customer do this to you? Jiwon asked. Do you know him? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath and started talking. His name is David Peterson. He's my uncle, my mother's brother. Minjun and Jiwon both stared at her. 2 years ago, my uncle was a regional manager for Burger Palace. He managed 5 or 6 locations in this city. He was good at his job. He loved it. Then he discovered something wrong at this location. Money was missing. Records were being changed. Someone was stealing from the company. Sarah paused and wiped her eyes. My uncle investigated quietly. He found proof that Robert was taking money. Robert was changing the books to cover it up. My uncle planned to report everything to corporate headquarters, but before he could, Robert found out. What happened? Jiwon asked. Robert accused my uncle of being the thief. Robert had fake documents that made it look like my uncle was stealing. Corporate believed Robert. They fired my uncle. The police investigated him. It was horrible. Everyone thought he was a criminal. But he wasn't? Minjun asked carefully. No. Eventually the police cleared him. They couldn't find any proof he did anything wrong. But by then his reputation was destroyed. He couldn't get another job in restaurant management. Nobody would hire him. His career was over. So now he's trying to get revenge, Jiwon said. Not revenge exactly, Sarah explained. He's trying to prove Robert is a bad manager. He's documenting every mistake, every health code violation. Every time Robert breaks company policy or treats workers badly, he's building a case to send to corporate. He wants them to investigate Robert properly this time. But you're caught in the middle, Minjun said. I didn't know any of this when I applied here 6 months ago. I just needed a job close to campus. When my uncle found out I was working here, he tried to convince me to quit, but I told him I couldn't afford to, so he started his campaign. But he didn't realize Robert would blame me for everything. Sarah put her head back in her hands. Robert figured out I'm related to my uncle. He sees the connection now. He's watching me constantly, looking for reasons to fire me, and my uncle's complaints are just making it worse. The three of them sat in silence for a moment. Min Jun's mind was working fast. Sarah had just confirmed something important. Robert had a history of stealing from the company. He had framed an innocent man to cover it up. And now he was running some kind of drug operation out of this same location. Robert was more than just a criminal. He was smart and dangerous. He had successfully destroyed Peterson's career 2 years ago. He could destroy Sarah's future too if he wanted. But Min Jun also saw an opportunity. Peterson was conducting his own investigation into Robert. He was documenting violations and building a case. That information might be useful for Min Jun's investigation too. Have you talked to your uncle about all this? Min Jun asked Sarah. Not recently. He doesn't answer my calls anymore. I think he feels guilty about putting me in this situation. Maybe you should try to talk to him, Min Jun suggested carefully. Maybe there's a way to fix this that helps everyone. Sarah looked doubtful but nodded. Maybe. They talked for a few more minutes, then went their separate ways. Min Jun drove home, but his mind stayed at the restaurant. He now understood the Peterson situation completely. It was not random revenge. It was justice. Peterson was trying to expose Robert the right way this time, with documentation and evidence. But Peterson did not know about the drugs. He thought Robert was just an embezzler and a bad manager. He had no idea he was interfering with an active police investigation. Min Jun needed to talk to Peterson, but he could not reveal his identity yet. His drug investigation was not complete. If he exposed himself now, Robert might run or destroy evidence. This was getting complicated. 2 investigations happening at once. A revenge campaign interfering with undercover police work. An innocent young woman caught between her uncle's justice and her boss's crimes. Min Jun had to find a way to manage both situations without exposing himself. He had to protect Sarah. He had to complete his investigation. And somehow, he had to help Peterson get the justice he deserved without ruining everything. It was a difficult balance, but Min Jun was a good detective. He would find a way to make it work. He had to. Min Jun made a decision. He needed to work both investigations at the same time. He would continue gathering evidence about Robert's drug operation, but he would also help Peterson's campaign in secret. The 2 efforts might actually support each other. The next day, Min Jun started documenting everything Robert did wrong at the restaurant. Health code violations, labor law problems, times when Robert yelled at workers, times when Robert cut corners on food safety. Min Jun took photos with his phone when nobody was watching. He wrote down dates and details in a small notebook he kept in his car. This was the same strategy Peterson was using. Min Jun was building his own case, but for different reasons. This evidence might be useful when he eventually arrested Robert. It would show a pattern of bad behavior. It would prove Robert was willing to break rules for profit. Min Jun also needed to set up better surveillance in the stockroom. His small camera had worked well, but he needed more. He wanted audio recording. He wanted to capture the conversations during those drug deals, not just the video. On his next overnight shift, Min Jun installed a second camera. This one had a microphone. He hid it in a different location, behind boxes of cleaning supplies. Now he had 2 angles of the stockroom and audio recording. If Robert had another meeting, Min Jun would have clear evidence of everything said and done. 3 days later, the cameras captured another meeting. 2 different men this time, but the same pattern. They came in through the back door around midnight. They gave Robert money. Robert gave them bags of pills. They talked briefly, and this time the microphone picked up their conversation. Same deal as last time? One man asked. Same deal, Robert confirmed. But the price is going up next month. My supplier is raising rates. Why? More risk. Police have been watching pill mills more carefully. It's harder to get inventory. Fine, we'll pay. Our customers aren't going anywhere. The men left. Robert locked the back door and returned to his office. Minjun watched the video later that night at home. He now had direct evidence of drug dealing. Clear video, clear audio. Robert admitting to supplying pills. But Minjun still needed more information. Who was Robert's supplier? Where did the pills come from? How many people were involved in this operation? He needed to wait a bit longer before making arrests. He needed the complete picture. Meanwhile, the Peterson situation was escalating. Corporate headquarters received Peterson's complaints and sent investigators to the restaurant. 2 people in business suits arrived one Wednesday morning and spent the whole day reviewing records, interviewing workers, and inspecting the facility. Robert was nervous. Minjun could see it. The manager stayed in his office most of the day, only coming out when the investigators asked for him. He spoke to them politely, but his jaw was tight with stress. The investigators talked to Sarah privately. They asked about customer complaints. They asked about Robert's management style. Sarah answered honestly, but carefully. She did not mention her uncle or the revenge campaign. She just described what happened when Peterson came in and how Robert reacted. They also talked to Minjun and other workers. Minjun told them the truth about what he had observed. Customers sometimes received wrong orders. Robert got angry about complaints. Nothing unusual for a fast food restaurant, but not perfect either. The investigators left after 6 hours. They said they would file a report with corporate and someone would follow up. Robert seemed relieved when they left, but he was also more paranoid than before. That evening, Robert called a staff meeting before the dinner shift. Everyone gathered near the counter while the restaurant was still closed to customers. Someone has been making complaints about this restaurant, Robert said. Corporate is now watching us closely. We all need to be more careful. Do your jobs exactly right. Follow every rule. Don't give anyone reason to complain. He looked around at everyone, his eyes hard. I'm also concerned about theft. Some inventory has gone missing, so I'm implementing new security measures. Random bag checks, random locker inspections. Anyone who objects can find another job. The workers nodded nervously. Nobody objected out loud, but Minjun felt his stomach tighten. If Robert started searching bags and lockers, he might find Minjun's detective badge. Minjun had hidden it in his car after the first close call, but he usually kept his phone and wallet in his locker during shifts. If Robert searched his phone, he might find evidence that Minjun was a cop. Photos of violations, notes about the investigation, contacts from the police station. That would expose everything. After the meeting ended, Minjun went to his car. He needed to remove anything that might identify him as a detective. He took his phone with him during his shift instead of leaving it in the locker. He deleted some notes and photos, backing them up on his laptop at home first. He had to be more careful now. That night, Minjun did something risky. He went to see Peterson. He had found Peterson's home address through the police database. It was a small house in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from the restaurant. Minjun knocked on the door around 8 in the evening. Peterson answered, looking surprised to see a Burger Palace employee at his door wearing the restaurant uniform. Mr. Peterson, my name is Minjun Carter. I work at Burger Palace. Can we talk? Peterson's expression became guarded. About what? About Robert Hayes, and about Sarah, your niece. Peterson studied Minjun for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. Come in. They sat in Peterson's small living room. Minjun chose his words carefully. He could not reveal he was a detective yet, but he needed to coordinate with Peterson without exposing his investigation. I know what you're doing, Minjun said. I know you're documenting violations to send to corporate. I know Robert framed you 2 years ago. Did Sarah tell you this? Yes, she's scared. She thinks Robert is going to fire her because of your campaign. Peterson looked pained. I know. I never meant for her to get caught in this, but I had to do something. Robert destroyed my career. He's still stealing from the company. Someone needs to stop him. I agree, Minjun said. And I want to help. Why? You work for him. Because I've seen how he treats people. I've seen the violations. And I think there's more going on than just embezzlement. Peterson leaned forward. What do you mean? Min-jun had to be careful here. He could not mention the drugs. That would compromise his investigation. But he could encourage Peterson's efforts in a way that supported both their goals. I mean, Robert is hiding something big. Your documentation is good, but you need more. Specific things that corporate and health inspectors can't ignore. I can help you get that information. You want to spy for me? I want Robert held accountable. Same as you. We just need to work together. Peterson thought about this. What kind of information can you get? Times when he violates health codes. Times when he breaks labor laws. Evidence of him mistreating workers. Things that will force corporate to investigate properly this time. And what do you want in return? Help Sarah keep her job. Stop coming in with those difficult orders. You've made your point. The complaints are filed. Corporate is investigating. Now back off so Robert stops targeting her. Peterson sat back. He looked tired. You're right. I've been so focused on getting justice that I didn't see how much stress I was putting on her. She's my niece. I should be protecting her, not making her life harder. Then let me handle this from the inside, Min-jun said. I'll document everything. I'll send you information you can use. You keep filing complaints through official channels. But stop the in-person visits. Give Sarah some space. Peterson agreed. They talked for another 30 minutes about what kinds of evidence would be most useful. Peterson explained what corporate investigators looked for, what violations would trigger immediate action, what kind of documentation they needed. Min-jun left feeling good about the meeting. He had established an alliance with Peterson without revealing his true identity. This would help both investigations. Peterson's official complaints would keep pressure on Robert. Min-jun's undercover work would gather evidence for both the corporate case and the criminal case, but Min-jun also felt guilty. He was using Peterson. He was not telling him about the drug investigation. When Min-jun finally arrested Robert, Peterson would be shocked to learn there was a detective working at the restaurant the whole time. Still, it was necessary. Min-jun could not expose his investigation yet. He needed more evidence. He needed to identify Robert's drug supplier. He needed to catch more dealers. The drug case was more important than the embezzlement case right now. Over the next 2 weeks, Min-jun sent Peterson regular updates. Photos of violations. Documentation of Robert breaking rules. Times when Robert yelled at workers or cut corners on food safety. Peterson compiled everything and sent regular reports to corporate headquarters and the health department. Robert got more and more stressed. He knew someone was reporting him, but he could not figure out who. He suspected several workers but had no proof. The paranoia made him sloppy. He made more mistakes, he got angry more often, he broke more rules. And Min-jun documented everything. He was building a case that would bury Robert completely. Drug charges, embezzlement charges, labor violations, health code violations. When this was over, Robert would go to prison for a long time. But Min-jun also knew time was running out. Robert was getting desperate. Desperate people did dangerous things. Min-jun needed to move soon before Robert did something that put workers at risk. Before he hurt Sarah or someone else. The final act was approaching. Min-jun could feel it. Everything was coming together. All the pieces were in place. Soon, very soon, he would have to reveal himself and end this investigation. He just needed a little more time. Everything started falling apart on a Thursday night. Min-jun was working the closing shift with Sarah and 2 other employees. The evening had been normal. Customers came and went. Orders were filled. The restaurant ran smoothly. Then around 10:30, Robert got a phone call. Min-jun watched him through the office window. Robert's face went pale as he listened. He started looking through papers on his desk frantically. He opened file cabinets and searched through folders. Something was very wrong. Robert finished the call and came out of the office. Everyone finish your closing tasks quickly tonight. I need you all out by 11 sharp. No exceptions. The workers exchanged glances but nodded. They cleaned faster than usual. By 10:50, most of the work was done. Robert stood near the door, clearly waiting for them to leave. He kept looking at his watch and checking his phone. Min-jun wanted to stay, but he could not without raising suspicion. He clocked out with everyone else and went to his car. But instead of driving away, he parked across the street in the lot of a closed store. He had a clear view of Burger Palace's back entrance. He waited. 20 minutes later, a car pulled up to the back door. A man got out. Min Jun recognized him from the surveillance videos. It was one of the regular drug dealers who came for pickups. But this time the man looked angry. He banged on the back door hard. Robert let him in. Through his car window, Min Jun could not hear what they said, but he could see them arguing through the back windows of the restaurant. The dealer was pointing at Robert and shouting. Robert was shaking his head and holding up his hands. The argument lasted about 10 minutes. Then the dealer left, slamming the door behind him. He got in his car and drove away fast. Robert stood in the stockroom alone, his head in his hands. Min Jun made a decision. Something was happening. The operation was falling apart. He needed to know what was going on. He called his sergeant. "We might need to move sooner than planned," Min Jun said. He explained what he had just witnessed. "Robert is losing control. His dealers are angry. This could get dangerous." "Give it one more day," his sergeant said. "We're close to identifying Robert's supplier. If we can get that information, we can shut down the whole operation, not just this one location." Min Jun agreed, but he felt uneasy. His detective instincts told him something bad was coming. The next day, Min Jun came in for his evening shift at 3 in the afternoon. The restaurant was busy with late lunch customers. Robert was in his office with the door closed. He had been there all day, according to other workers. He had not come out except to use the bathroom. Sarah worked the drive-through window. She looked stressed. When Min Jun got a chance, he asked her if everything was okay. "Robert has been weird all day," she whispered. "He's making lots of phone calls, and I heard him arguing with someone. It sounded bad." "Did you hear what they were arguing about?" "No. But Robert sounded scared. I've never heard him sound like that before." Min Jun felt his concern growing. A scared criminal was a dangerous criminal. If Robert felt trapped, he might do something desperate. The shift continued. Dinner rush started around 5:30. The restaurant got crowded. Orders backed up. Everyone worked hard to keep up with demand. Robert finally came out of his office around 6. He helped for a little while, but he was distracted. He made mistakes on orders. He forgot to call out numbers. His mind was clearly somewhere else. At 7 o'clock, Min Jun saw something through the front windows that made his heart stop. 2 police cars pulled into the parking lot, but these were not Min Jun's backup. He had not called them. This was something else. The officers got out and walked into the restaurant. Robert saw them immediately. His face went white. One officer approached the counter. "We're looking for Robert Hayes. Is he here?" Robert stepped forward slowly. "I'm Robert Hayes. What is this about?" "We have some questions about suspicious activity at this location. Can we talk in your office?" Robert looked around at all the workers and customers watching. He had no choice. "Yes, follow me." The 3 of them went into the office and closed the door. The workers stood frozen behind the counter. Customers whispered to each other. Everyone was confused and curious. Min Jun's mind raced. Why were police here? Who called them? This was not part of his investigation. Someone else had reported something. This could ruin everything. If Robert got arrested now before Min Jun finished his investigation, they might not catch everyone in the drug operation. The supplier would disappear. Other dealers would run. The case would have holes in it. After 15 minutes, the officers and Robert came out of the office. Robert looked shaken but tried to appear calm. The officers thanked him and left. They did not arrest him. This was just questioning. After the officers left, Robert announced that the restaurant was closing early. He sent all the workers home immediately. He said there was a plumbing emergency, and corporate had ordered the closure. Everyone knew this was a lie, but nobody argued. They all clocked out and left. Min Jun went to his car but stayed in the parking lot again watching. Robert locked the front doors, then he went back to his office. Through the windows, Min Jun could see him frantically packing things into bags, papers, files, his laptop. Robert was running. Min Jun called his sergeant immediately. "Robert is fleeing. Police just questioned him about something. I don't know what, but he's packing up now. We need to move. Where are you? In the parking lot watching him. Do not approach him alone. I'm sending backup now, just watch and report. Understood. Minjun watched Robert work. About 20 minutes later, Robert came out of the office carrying 2 large bags and a box. He loaded them into his car. Then he went back inside. He was in the stockroom for several minutes. When he came out, he was carrying another bag. Then Robert did something Minjun did not expect. He went to the security system and started pulling wires. He was destroying the surveillance recordings. He was erasing evidence. Minjun's backup had not arrived yet. He could not let Robert destroy everything. Minjun got out of his car and walked to the back entrance. He tried the door. It was unlocked. Robert must have forgotten to lock it in his panic. Minjun went inside quietly. He could hear Robert in the office, still destroying things. Minjun went to the stockroom where his hidden cameras were. He quickly retrieved both cameras and put them in his pockets. These had evidence that Robert did not even know existed. Minjun had to protect them. Then he heard a crash from the office. Robert was smashing the computer. This was bad. The computer probably had financial records, communication with dealers, everything. Robert was erasing his entire operation. Minjun had to make a choice. Reveal himself now and stop Robert, or stay hidden and risk losing evidence. His backup was still several minutes away based on the time. Before he could decide, Sarah walked through the back door. I forgot my phone in my locker, she said. Then she saw Minjun standing in the stockroom and Robert destroying things in the office. What's happening? Her voice carried. Robert heard her. He came out of the office and saw both of them. His face changed from panic to anger. What are you doing here? Robert demanded. I sent everyone home. I just came back for my phone, Sarah said, backing toward the door. Robert looked at Minjun. And you? Why are you sneaking around back here? Minjun realized his cover was about to be blown anyway. He made his decision. He pulled out his detective badge from his pocket and held it up. Because I'm a police detective, and you're under arrest for drug distribution. Robert stared at the badge. Then he looked at Minjun's face. Understanding and fury crossed his expression. You've been spying on me this whole time. Yes, and I have evidence of everything, the late-night meetings, the drugs, the money, all of it. Sarah gasped. You're a cop? Stay back, Sarah, Minjun said, keeping his eyes on Robert. Robert suddenly moved. He ran toward the back door. Minjun moved to block him, but Robert was faster than expected. He pushed past Minjun hard, knocking him into a shelf. Boxes fell. Minjun stumbled, but caught his balance. Robert ran out the back door into the parking lot. Minjun ran after him. Sarah stood in the stockroom, shocked and confused. In the parking lot, Robert reached his car. But before he could get in, 3 police cars pulled in, blocking his exit. Minjun's backup had arrived. Officers jumped out with weapons drawn. On the ground! Now! They shouted. Robert looked around. He was surrounded. There was nowhere to go. Slowly, he got down on his knees and put his hands behind his head. Officers moved in and handcuffed him. They read him his rights. Robert did not say anything. He just stared at the ground as they led him to a police car. Sergeant Williams walked over to Minjun. Good work, you got him. He destroyed the office computer, Minjun said. And the security system recordings, but I have my own cameras. I got everything we need. Excellent. We'll process him and search the premises. Did anyone else see what happened? Sarah Kim. She walked in at the wrong time. She knows I'm a detective now. We'll need to talk to her. Make sure she's okay. This must be a shock. Minjun nodded. He walked back inside where Sarah still stood in the stockroom. She looked at him with wide eyes. You been undercover this whole time? She asked. Yes, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. I was investigating Robert for drug distribution. Drugs? I thought he was just stealing money. It's more complicated than that. I'll explain everything. But first, are you okay? Sarah nodded slowly. I think so. This is just a lot to process. You worked beside me for months and I had no idea. That was the point. But it's over now. Robert is arrested. You're safe. And your uncle's complaints help too. The corporate investigation put pressure on Robert and made him nervous. That helped my case. Sarah sat down on a box, trying to understand everything. The restaurant that had been her workplace for months was now a crime scene. Her boss was a drug dealer. Her co-worker was an undercover detective. Nothing was what it seemed. Min-jun's investigation was over, but the story was not finished yet. The police spent the next 3 hours processing the crime scene. They searched Robert's office thoroughly. They collected evidence from the stockroom. They interviewed Sarah and other workers who lived nearby and came when they heard what happened. Min-jun gave his official statement and handed over the hidden cameras with all their recordings. Robert was taken to the police station for booking. He was charged with drug distribution, possession with intent to sell, and destruction of evidence. His bail was set high. He could not afford to pay it, so he stayed in jail waiting for trial. The 2 men from Min-jun's surveillance videos were identified through police databases. They were both known drug dealers with previous arrests. Police picked them up the next morning at their homes. They both had drugs and cash when they were arrested. They tried to make deals, offering to give information about bigger dealers in exchange for reduced charges. But the biggest question remained. Who was Robert's supplier? Where were the drugs coming from? Robert refused to talk. He got a lawyer immediately and said nothing to police. The 2 dealers claimed they did not know. They said they only dealt with Robert. Min-jun worked with other detectives to analyze the evidence from his cameras. They studied the recordings frame by frame. They listened to every conversation. In one recording, Robert mentioned that his supplier was raising rates. In another, he talked about inventory from the usual source. But he never mentioned names or specific locations. The investigation expanded. Police looked into Robert's financial records. His bank accounts showed regular large cash deposits that did not match his manager's salary. They found rental payments for a storage unit across town. When police searched the unit, they found more drugs. Thousands of pills in boxes. This was bigger than anyone thought. Meanwhile, the corporate investigation into Robert's management was also concluding. With Robert arrested for drugs, corporate investigators dug deeper into the restaurant's finances. They found exactly what Peterson had claimed 2 years ago. Robert had been embezzling money for at least 3 years, maybe longer. He had created fake invoices for supplies that were never delivered. He had been pocketing the difference. Corporate headquarters realized they had made a terrible mistake. They had fired Peterson based on Robert's lies. They had destroyed an innocent man's career while a criminal continued working for them. The company immediately contacted Peterson through his lawyer. 3 days after Robert's arrest, Peterson came to the police station. He wanted to talk to Min-jun. They met in a small conference room. Sarah told me everything, Peterson said. You were undercover this whole time. You worked there for months gathering evidence. Yes, Min-jun said. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you. It would have compromised the investigation. I understand. I'm just grateful Robert is finally caught. Sarah says you have evidence of drug dealing? Yes. Clear video and audio recordings. He's going to prison for a long time. Peterson sat back in his chair, looking relieved. For 2 years I thought I was crazy. Everyone believed Robert. Corporate, the police, even some of my friends. They all thought I was the criminal. Now the truth is finally out. Corporate wants to meet with you, Min-jun said. They realized you were right about everything. They want to apologize. An apology doesn't give me back 2 years of my life. It doesn't fix my reputation. No, but it's a start, and they're offering you a settlement. A good one, according to your lawyer. Peterson nodded slowly. My lawyer told me. They offered me my old job back too. Different region, different restaurants. But I don't know if I want it. What do you mean? Being fired was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it also freed me from something. I was working 70 hours a week managing restaurants. I had no life outside of work. After I was fired, I started a small consulting business. I help new restaurants set up their operations. It's less money, but I work my own hours. I see my family more. I'm happier. Then don't go back, Min-jun said. Take the settlement. Keep doing what makes you happy. You earned justice. That's what matters. Peterson smiled for the first time since Min-jun met him. You're right. I spent 2 years trying to prove I was innocent. Now I have. That's enough. I can move forward now. They talked for a while longer. Peterson thanked Min-jun for protecting Sarah during the investigation. He also admitted that his revenge campaign against Robert had been satisfying, but he regretted putting his niece in a difficult position. I was so focused on getting justice that I forgot about the people around me, Peterson said. Sarah was scared and stressed, and I made it worse. I should have stopped sooner. You were trying to prove the truth, Min-jun said. Sometimes good people do questionable things for the right reasons. That doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. Peterson left the station looking lighter somehow. The burden of 2 years of anger and frustration was finally lifted. He had his justice. His reputation would be restored. He could move on with his life. The following week, more pieces of the case fell into place. Police identified Robert's drug supplier through financial records and phone logs. It was a doctor in a nearby suburb who had been running a pill mill. He prescribed unnecessary medications to fake patients, then sold the pills to dealers like Robert. The doctor was arrested, along with several other people in his operation. The case made local news. Fast food drug ring busted by undercover detective was the headline. Min-jun's picture appeared in newspapers and on TV. His sergeant gave interviews praising the investigation. The police chief held a press conference. Sarah watched the news coverage at home with her family. She still could not believe that Min-jun, the quiet co-worker who had worked beside her for months, was actually a detective conducting a major investigation. She thought about all their conversations, all the times they closed the restaurant together, all the times he had seemed like just a regular person trying to make money at a boring job. He had been acting the whole time, playing a role. It was strange to think about. But Sarah also felt grateful. Min-jun had protected her. He had arrested Robert before the situation got worse, and he had helped her uncle get justice, even if that was not his original mission. Ji-won called Sarah after seeing the news. I can't believe Min-jun was a cop. Did you have any idea? No, none at all. He was so normal, so regular. I never suspected anything. That's what makes a good undercover detective, I guess, the ability to blend in completely. Sarah agreed. She thought about her own life and how much had changed in just 1 week. Her boss was in jail. Her workplace was closed temporarily while corporate cleaned everything up and hired new management. Her uncle was finally vindicated after 2 years of shame. And her coworker was actually a hero who had taken down a drug operation. Life was strange sometimes. Things were not always what they seemed. People had secrets. Places had hidden stories. The world was more complicated than it appeared on the surface. Robert's trial happened 4 months later. He pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a lighter sentence. Even with the plea deal, he received 12 years in prison. The judge said his crimes were serious. He had endangered his community by distributing drugs. He had abused his position of authority. He had destroyed an innocent man's reputation to cover his crimes. The sentence needed to reflect the gravity of his actions. The 2 dealers who worked with Robert received shorter sentences. The doctor who supplied the pills got 15 years. The entire operation was shut down. Police estimated they had taken thousands of illegal pills off the streets. Corporate headquarters issued a public apology to Peterson. They offered him a financial settlement of $200,000 for wrongful termination and damage to his reputation. Peterson accepted. He also received a formal letter clearing his name of all accusations. Corporate sent copies to every company in the restaurant industry, ensuring everyone knew he was innocent. Peterson used some of the settlement money to expand his consulting business. He hired 2 employees and started working with restaurants across 3 states. His reputation in the industry was slowly rebuilding. People who had doubted him 2 years ago now respected him again. Burger Palace reopened 6 weeks after Robert's arrest. Corporate brought in a new manager from another region. Her name was Yun Seo Martinez. She was professional, kind, and ran the restaurant properly. She treated workers with respect. She followed all health codes. She never yelled or threatened anyone. Sarah returned to work under the new management. The atmosphere was completely different. Workers were not afraid anymore. They could do their jobs without constant stress. They could make mistakes without fear of being screamed at. It felt like a different place. Jiwon was promoted to shift supervisor under the new management. Corporate recognized that the old staff had endured difficult conditions and deserved recognition. Several workers got raises. New policies were put in place to protect employees from management abuse. Min-jun returned to regular detective work at the police station. The Burger Palace case became one of his most successful investigations. It led to 17 arrests total, counting Robert, his dealers, the supplier, and others connected to the drug operation. His sergeant wrote a commendation for his file. Min-jun received an award from the police chief. But what Min-jun remembered most was not the arrests or the awards. It was the moment when Sarah realized he was a detective. The shock in her eyes, the confusion and betrayal. He had lied to her for months, even though it was for a good reason. That bothered him more than he expected. A month after the restaurant reopened, Min-jun went to visit. He wore regular clothes, not a police uniform. He ordered a burger and fries. Sarah was working the counter. When she saw him, she smiled. "Detective Carter, what brings you here?" "Just wanted to see how everyone was doing, and to eat. The food here is actually pretty good." Sarah laughed. "You had to eat at every shift for months. You're probably sick of it." "Maybe a little, but I have good memories too. Despite everything, working here taught me things about people, about courage, about how ordinary people deal with difficult situations." "Is that your way of saying we're brave?" "Yes. You and Jiwon and the others. You all dealt with Robert's behavior every day. You could have quit, but you stayed. That takes strength." Sarah looked thoughtful. "I needed the job, but you're right, it was hard. I'm glad it's over. And I'm glad you were there, even if I didn't know who you really were." They talked for a few more minutes. Min-jun took his food and sat at a table. He watched the restaurant operate smoothly under new management. He watched workers smile and joke with each other. He watched customers come and go, unaware of the drama that had unfolded here just months ago. Everything looked normal now. A regular fast food restaurant, nothing special. But Min-jun knew better. He knew the secrets that had been hidden here. The crimes, the revenge, the fear, the justice. Sometimes the most important stories happened in the most ordinary places, hidden in plain sight, behind a counter at a fast food restaurant, where nobody expected to find anything interesting at all. 1 year after Robert's arrest, Min-jun sat at his desk at the police station reading through a new case file. His sergeant had just given him another assignment, another anonymous tip, another situation that seemed small but might be hiding something bigger, another chance to go undercover and investigate. Min-jun smiled as he read the details. This time it was a car wash. Someone reported suspicious activity, cash payments that did not match the business volume, workers who seemed afraid, late-night meetings. The pattern was similar to the Burger Palace case. "Ready for another undercover job?" his sergeant asked. "Always," Min-jun said. "These cases are interesting. You never know what you'll find." The Burger Palace investigation was good work, one of our best drug busts this year, and it led to that whole pill mill operation getting shut down. You should be proud. Min-jun was proud, but not just about the arrests. He was proud of what happened after. Sarah graduated from college the previous spring with a degree in criminal justice. She had changed her major after watching Min-jun's investigation unfold. She wanted to become a detective too. She wanted to help people the way Min-jun had helped her and her uncle. Sarah had applied to the police academy and been accepted. She started training in 2 months. Min-jun had written her a recommendation letter. He told the academy about her courage during the investigation, how she had testified at Robert's trial despite being scared, how she had kept working at the restaurant even when things were difficult, how she had the kind of character that made good police officers. Peterson's life had also changed for the better. His consulting business was successful. He worked with restaurants across 5 states now. He had hired 3 more employees. He was making more money than he ever made as a regional manager, and he was happier. He had free time for his family. He had hobbies. He had a life outside of work. But the biggest change was his reputation. Everyone in the restaurant industry now knew he had been wrongly accused. They knew he had been the victim of a criminal manager's lies. They respected him for fighting back and proving the truth. Some people even called him for advice because they admired his integrity. 3 months ago, Peterson had gotten married. Sarah was at the wedding. So was Min Jun, who Peterson had invited as a special guest. At the reception, Peterson gave a speech thanking everyone who supported him during the difficult years. He specifically mentioned Min Jun, calling him the detective who found truth hidden in plain sight. Min Jun had felt embarrassed by the praise. He was just doing his job. But Peterson insisted that Min Jun had done more than his job. He had connected 2 separate investigations. He had helped an innocent man get justice while also stopping criminals. He had protected workers while gathering evidence. That took skill and character. The Burger Palace itself thrived under new management. Yunseo Martinez ran the location professionally. She treated workers well. She followed all rules. Corporate headquarters used her as an example of good management. They even made a training video featuring her restaurant, showing other managers how to run things properly. Ji-won was still there as a shift supervisor. He enjoyed the job now that the stress was gone. He was thinking about applying for assistant manager positions at other locations. Corporate had noticed his loyalty and hard work during the difficult times. They told him he had a future with the company if he wanted it. Several of the workers who had quit under Robert's management returned after hearing about the changes. They said working there was pleasant now. The environment was positive. They felt respected. It was proof that good management made all the difference. The restaurant occasionally appeared in news stories as an example of how corporate investigations could improve workplaces. Journalists interviewed Yunseo about her management style. They talked to workers about the changes. Everyone agreed the restaurant was better in every way. But Min Jun knew that most people who ate there had no idea about any of this. They just came in, ordered their food, and left. They did not know about the drug operation that used to run out of the stockroom. They did not know about the embezzlement. They did not know about Peterson's 2-year fight for justice. They did not know about the undercover detective who worked there for months. That was fine. Some stories did not need to be widely known. The important thing was that justice had been served. Criminals were punished. Innocent people were vindicated. Workers were protected. The community was safer. Min Jun thought about all the lessons he learned from the Burger Palace case. He learned that big crimes often hid in small places. He learned that patience was important in investigations. He learned that multiple problems could exist in the same location at the same time. He learned that protecting innocent people was just as important as catching criminals. He also learned that undercover work was harder than it looked. Living a false identity for months was exhausting. Lying to people every day, even for good reasons, felt wrong. Making friends with coworkers while secretly investigating their boss created complicated feelings. Min Jun had not expected the emotional difficulty of undercover work. But he also discovered he was good at it. He could blend in. He could act naturally. He could gain people's trust without being dishonest about his character, even if he was dishonest about his job. That was a valuable skill for a detective. The case also taught him about revenge and justice. Peterson's campaign against Robert could have been simple revenge. A fired employee causing trouble for the boss who ruined his career. But Peterson had been careful. He documented violations. He filed complaints through proper channels. He built a case using legal methods. He wanted justice, not just revenge. That distinction mattered. Revenge was about hurting someone who hurt you. Justice was about holding someone accountable for their actions through proper systems. Peterson chose justice. Even when revenge might have been easier or more satisfying, Min Jun respected that. He also respected how Peterson eventually realized his campaign was hurting his niece and backed off. That showed character. The ability to see beyond your own goals to how your actions affected others. That was maturity. Sarah had learned similar lessons. She told Min Jun that watching the investigation changed how she thought about justice. She used to think justice was simple. Good people versus bad people. Right versus wrong. But the Burger Palace situation showed her that justice was complicated. Multiple things could be true at once. Robert was a criminal, but he was also a person who made choices. Peterson wanted justice, but he also hurt his niece accidentally. Min Jun was a hero, but he also lied to everyone for months. Understanding these complications made Sarah want to become a detective even more. She wanted to work in a field where she had to think carefully about justice, where she had to consider everyone affected by crimes, not just the criminals and victims, where she had to balance competing interests and make difficult decisions. Min-jun thought Sarah would make an excellent detective. She was smart. She was observant. She cared about people. She understood that real life was complicated. Those qualities would serve her well in police work. Now, sitting at his desk with a new case file, Min-jun prepared for his next assignment. He would go undercover at a car wash. He would watch and listen. He would document evidence. He would figure out if the suspicious activity was real or imagined. He would protect innocent people while catching criminals. It was what he did. It was what he was good at. It was why he became a detective. Before leaving for the day, Min-jun received a text message. It was from Sarah. She was excited about starting the police academy. She asked if Min-jun had any advice for her. Min-jun thought for a moment, then typed his response. Remember that justice is about people, not just cases. Pay attention to everyone affected by crimes, not just the obvious victims and criminals. Stay patient. Watch carefully. Listen to your instincts, and never forget that sometimes the most important work happens in the most ordinary places. Good luck. You'll be great. Sarah replied immediately. Thank you. I hope someday I can be as good a detective as you. Min-jun smiled. He hoped so too. The world needed more detectives who cared about justice, who thought about all the people affected by crimes, who understood that real life was complicated and messy and required careful thought. He packed up his desk and left the station. Tomorrow he would start preparing for his car wash assignment. He would create a new cover story. He would practice being someone else. He would get ready to spend weeks or months living a lie to find the truth. But tonight he would go home and rest. He would think about the Burger Palace case and all the people whose lives changed because of it. Robert in prison. Peterson vindicated. Sarah becoming a detective. Workers feeling safe in their jobs. A drug operation shut down. Justice served. It was good work. Important work. The kind of work that made being a detective worthwhile. Sometimes people asked Min-jun if police work was dangerous. He always said yes, but not in the way people thought. The physical danger was real, but the harder part was the emotional difficulty. Getting close to people while lying about who you were. Watching people suffer while waiting for the right moment to act. Knowing secrets that could hurt people if revealed at the wrong time. The Burger Palace case had all of those difficulties. But it also had something else. It had resolution. It had justice. It had people whose lives improved because of the investigation. That made the difficult parts worth it. Min-jun drove home through the city, passing restaurants and shops and ordinary places where ordinary people lived ordinary lives. He wondered how many of those places hid secrets. How many had crimes happening behind the scenes. How many had stories waiting to be uncovered, probably more than anyone realized. Because that was the thing about crimes. They happened everywhere, in rich neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods, in big businesses and small businesses, in places that looked perfectly normal from the outside. That was why detectives existed, to look beneath the surface, to find what was hidden, to bring truth to light, to protect people who could not protect themselves, to make sure justice was served, even when it was difficult and complicated and took months of careful work. It was good work. Important work. The kind of work Min-jun would keep doing for as long as he could. Because somewhere in this city, in an ordinary place that looked completely normal, someone needed help. Someone needed justice. Someone needed a detective willing to dig deep and find the truth hidden in plain sight. And Min-jun would be there, watching and waiting and working, until the case was solved and justice was served. Just like he did at Burger Palace. Just like he would do at the car wash. Just like he would keep doing wherever his work took him. Because that was what detectives did. They found the truth no matter where it was hiding,